All right, so in this lecture, we're going to be continuing our discussion of personality processes, which, if you remember, were defined as mechanisms that unfold over time to produce the effects of personality traits. And in this lecture, we're going to focus on the personality processes of motivation and emotion. So let's start with motivation. Overall, personality psychologists have claimed that in addition to affecting our perceptions and our thoughts, our personalities also likely shape what we want and how we'll try and get it. In other words, our motivation. And in general, there are two essential concepts when discussing motivation: goals and strategies. Goals are defined as the ends that we desire, so essentially what we want. And scholars who work on goal theories have identified a lot of different kinds of goals, the development of which is based on a combination of factors, including our personalities. So first, researchers have stated that people have a variety of implicit and explicit goals. Implicit goals are those that people don't really know they have. They're goals that exist in the unconscious that nonetheless shape behavior. Explicit goals, on the other hand, are goals that people can talk about and willingly describe, goals that exist in the conscious mind. And likely what causes some goals to be explicit and others to be implicit are our psychological defenses. So, for example, in U.S. society, there is still this notion that women should want to be mothers, that there's this kind of biological imperative that's been socially legitimized, so many women will explicitly say that one of their goals in life is to be a mother. However, as U.S. culture has changed, a lot of women also have the goal to be occupationally successful and powerful. Unfortunately, because the design of the U.S. labor market and what it takes to achieve occupational success, these two goals in some ways compete with one another. And so if a woman grows up in a culture in which motherhood is upheld as a more important goal than occupational success, if the women's definition of what it looks like to be a good woman is based on being a mother, then the goal of occupational success can become relegated to the unconscious, making it an implicit goal. But just because it's unconscious doesn't mean it's not important. In fact, research has shown that people are happier when they're making progress towards achieving their implicit goals rather than just their explicit goals. Research has also shown that people have both short and long-term goals. Short-term goals are those that are specific and activity-based, whereas long-term goals, which are also called general goals, are focused on an ultimate purpose. So we can think of long-term goals as the forest, the overarching gestalt, and short-term goals as the individual trees in that forest. And what research has shown is that both are essential, because without short-term goals, you don't get anything done, but without long-term goals, life might feel like it lacks meaning. And so when I'm working with clients and we're talking about goal setting and prioritization, one of the things that we focus on is acknowledging both of these types of goals, both what has to get done in the moment and what these individual activities are ultimately leading to. So here's an example. I was working in a private clinic in Boston, and I had this 17-year-old client who had a goal of going to college and then ultimately doing humanitarian aid work. And one of the things that she was struggling with was that high school felt relatively meaningless. I'm sure many people feel that way. She knew it was a necessary step for her to go to college, and she also knew that she needed her college degree in order to do the type of work she wanted to do. But she often felt that her daily life wasn't tangibly connected to her long-term goal of helping others. And so what we did was twofold. First, we got her involved in volunteering so she could have that sense of giving back. But we also worked on developing language to help her connect her daily tasks to that long-term goal. So for example, she would have a paper due, and we would connect the dots between the paper and her ultimate life goals. Finally, researchers have also found that goals can be ideographic or they can be nomothetic. And ideographic goals are those that are unique to the individual that pursues them. Overall, ideographic goals have been thought of in a few ways: as current concerns, which cause us to be motivated until the goal is either attained or abandoned; as personal projects, which determine the effort that people put into their goals; or as personal strivings that are more like general or long-term goals. And what research has shown us about ideographic or personal goals is that they're conscious at least some of the time. They often describe thoughts and behaviors aimed at fairly specific outcomes. They can change over time, and that these goals function independently of each other. However, these personal goals are often not theoretically organized, so they're not all similar, and so as a result, sometimes the pursuit of these goals leads people off in a lot of different directions. Nomothetic goals, on the other hand, are essential motivations that almost everyone pursues, so things like clothing, safety, affiliation, etc. And overall, nomothetic goals tend to bring order to ideographic goals. Now, there are a number of different types of nomothetic goals. We've already talked about McClelland's 3 goals, which include the need for achievement, the need for affiliation, and the need for power. Funder also describes Emmons' 5 goals that include enjoyment, self-assertion, esteem, interpersonal success, and avoidance of negative affect. The goals circumflex attempts to represent goals in terms of their arrangement around a circle. So overall, the goals circumflex states that goals are organized along 2 axes, extrinsic versus intrinsic, and in service of either self-transcendence or the physical self. And what researchers have said is that regardless of where people are from, all of their goals can be arranged somewhere along this circle. Scholars have also differentiated between judgment goals and development goals, and in particular in education, this is something we think quite a bit about. Judgment goals are defined as those goals that people enact when they're seeking to judge or validate themselves, oftentimes leading to helplessness, whereas development goals are those that people enact when they're seeking to improve themselves, leading to mastery. And it's been hypothesized that people formulate these judgment or development goals in part based on whether they ascribed to an entity theory or an incremental theory. So, people who believe in an entity theory believe that personal qualities are fixed. So people are smart, or they are attractive, or they are capable. There's no changing that. So you can only set goals that end up judging whether or not those qualities are present or not. People who believe in an incremental theory, on the other hand, believe that personal qualities can change over time and with experience. So people can become smart, they can become attractive, and they can become capable. As a result, these people set goals that will help them develop these qualities over time. The other essential concept that we get from motivation theorists is strategies. And strategies are defined as the means that we use to achieve the desired end or goal that we're pursuing. And in general, scholars have claimed that as they relate to personality, traits can produce characteristic adaptations or generalized strategies. The same strategy can result in different behavior patterns, and different traits can lead to the same strategies. The last personality process we need to talk about is emotion. And what personality theorists have said is that personalities can also determine the types of emotions we experience and the strength of those emotions. Now, we define emotion as a natural instinctive state of mind deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. And emotions are thought to be formed as a result of 5 stages. So appraisal, when you're reading the situation in order to determine what the appropriate emotion is. The physical responses, so for example, in the case of fear, this could include an increased heart rate, so pupil dilation, etc. Facial expression, so smiles or frowns, etc. Nonverbal behaviors that accompany that emotion. And finally, motives, which is the behavioral repercussions of emotions, such as sharing your happiness with others or looking to harm someone. And one of the really interesting things that's been found is that facial expressions linked with certain emotions are actually universal. So you can show these pictures to people all over the world, regardless of how remote or how industrialized, regardless of what language they speak, and they'll always be interpreted in the same way, as joy, surprise, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, or contempt. So those are universal emotions that everyone experiences them, and they're universally represented. One of the difficulties that people face in studying emotions, however, is that they're extremely diverse. So there have been various methods for organizing or making sense of emotions. One of these methods that Funder talks about is the emotions circumplex, which arranges emotions along 2 main axes, from aroused to unaroused and from negative to positive. In addition, the sort of sub-axes include from excited to bored and from alarmed to serene. And the idea is that you can locate any emotion along this circumplex. However, as Funder notes, the circumplex is really only helpful when you're trying to compare emotions to one another. So how does shame differ from defiance or something like that? In order to explain certain emotions, researchers have instead argued that it's more helpful to examine emotions one at a time, thinking about what adaptive function the emotion might serve. So, for example, if we're trying to understand the specific emotion of sadness, it makes sense to try and understand what typically causes the feeling. what the response is, and what purpose it serves, in this case to either receive support from others or to disengage from the loss. What researchers have also shown is that there are tremendous differences in people's emotional life, which are thought to be determined by personality. What researchers have also shown is that there are tremendous differences in people's emotional life, which are thought to be determined by personality. So, for example, people vary widely in their affective intensity, so how strongly they feel their emotions. People can also widely in how quickly they change their emotions. And individuals also vary in how emotionally intelligent they are, which is defined as how accurately people perceive emotions in themselves and others, and how capable they are at controlling and regulating their emotions. One emotion in particular that researchers have spent a considerable amount of time talking about is happiness. We've even spent a good amount of time talking about it in class. And what researchers have shown is that a person's happiness is determined by a number of different factors. The first factor is an individual's set point, which is essentially like their resting emotional level. Just like people's resting facial expressions, people are also thought to have a resting emotional level, which can vary widely from person to person based on personality. For some people, this set point is happier than it is for other people. In addition, happiness has also been shown to be based on objective life circumstances and what the individual actually does. However, what research has shown is that our life circumstances are actually a really small part of how happy we feel. Our set point and then what we actually do on a daily basis are much more determinant of our happiness than our circumstances. So there's your review of the 4 personality processes. Now you should go ahead and take the quiz that's on Canvas. Remember that you can post any questions you have on the discussion board. If you have any additional questions about the class or assignments or anything like that, feel free to drop me an email. Take care.